Okay, good morning and welcome to Paradigm's Investor Webinar. Thank you for joining us. Today, we'll be discussing our ongoing global phase 3 clinical trial for knee osteoarthritis, along with two significant recent developments. Firstly, the acquisition of Proteo Bioactives, which expands our osteoarthritis portfolio with a novel oral combination therapy. And this morning's release of securing a 27 million convertible note facility to support the continued execution of our phase 3 program. I'm joined today by Melanie Duiker, Paradigm's Head of Clinical Development, Paul Rennie, Founder and Managing Director, and Abby Macnish, our Chief Financial Officer. Today's webinar will run for approximately 45 minutes and we will include time for questions at the end. Please note the session is being recorded and will be made available on Paradigm's website following the conclusion. We'll aim to address as many questions as possible. Please note similar questions may be grouped together, and we ask that questions remain relevant to recent releases, as unrelated queries may be moderated. With that, I'll hand over to Paul Rennie for a brief introduction. Please go ahead, Paul.
Thanks very much, Simon. Next slide, please. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of the people attending. Thank you very much for joining. As an ASX-listed company, obviously, we disclose our disclaimer. Now, on this slide, I'd like to just touch on the four recent announcements that Paradigm has made. So first of all, we announced that we had centralised ethics approval in the United States and Australia. What that means is that any sites in the United States that we may wish to bring on at some stage have already now got ethics approval. So it does mean that we can recruit sites faster and more efficiently than without having to go through an ethics approval for each site. So that's a real time saver, money saver as well. We also announced the phase 3 OA program has commenced, and we have site activation across many sites in the United States, and we have our first number of subjects that have been consented in the United States, as well as our recently announced patient consented in Australia. As Simon said, we also have announced the acquisition of some new intellectual property, which was developed by Professor Peter Ghosh, and it really allows Paradigm to expand our portfolio into the treatment of people with osteoarthritis. And we'll also spend some time going through the announcement today, which covered the secured funding to take us all the way through to 100% recruitment of subjects and also through the interim analysis and beyond. So we're very excited that we now have the funds to get all of those 466 subjects recruited into the trial. Next slide, please. Now, I just quickly want to recap on the phase 2 studies and show investors why we are confident in our phase 3 trial design and also confident in our interim analysis. I would like to just say that unfortunately Dr. Skerritt can't join us today, but we are going to organise another webinar in the coming month where we will take investors through the drug effect size of these trials and be able to show consistency in the data that we have from a number of different trials, which gives us a lot of confidence. But also we will talk and take you through how we have sized the phase 3 clinical trial and what gives us confidence in relation to the readout for the interim analysis. Now, very briefly, as you can see, first randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study was done by Peter Ghosh, looking at people with moderate to severe osteoarthritis. And one of the outcomes of that was after a single course of treatment, he saw that for 6 months there was improved pain scores, and there were also improved joint scores, as well as the global assessment of pain was very significant. We then saw Professor Kenji Kumagai, who ran a study in Japan. He looked at patients with more mild osteoarthritis, and what he found was that there was an improvement from baseline out to 52 weeks. So he was the first person really to show after a single course of the drug that there was still effects seen out for 1 year. He was also the first person who really pointed to the fact that there was a reduction in one of the very well-known biomarkers of osteoarthritis, C2C, which is a peptide of type 2 collagen, which is released when the enzymes are breaking down the collagen. So that was also giving us a lot of confidence, knowing that the drug had some potential for modifying the course of the disease. So given these two studies, we took the learnings from both of them and we designed our Para-005 study. Now, this was a double-blind placebo-controlled study, but we also stratified subjects into two different cohorts of baseline pain. So we wanted to explore the findings of Kumagai and Ghosh a little bit further. So we had a cohort of NRS background pain of 4 to 6, and then we had other subjects with a much higher pain score of 7 to 9 out of 10. Now, what we found was that even though the randomization meant that there were more people randomized into the 4 to 6 group, we did see a very significant improvement in the smaller number of subjects who had the more severe pain. So I think that learning then allowed us to focus on what we considered to be our ideal patient for this particular drug. So we're talking about injectable pentosan polysulfate. So the ideal patient from this has a high background pain coming into the study, generally Kellgren-Lawrence 2, 3, or 4. And this patient often has very significant symptoms as well as imaging evidence to suggest that the disease is progressing very quickly, such as bone marrow edema lesions, such as synovitis with pannus formation. Also, we see that these subjects have reduced joint space width on X-ray, and they also have cartilage loss on MRI. So this tends to now be our if you like, target population for the trial. So we did a smaller study, Para-008, and we looked specifically at these subjects. So they had a high background of pain, they had bone marrow edema lesions, they had synovitis, including pannus formation in many of the subjects. And we followed them out for 12 months like Kumagai. And what we found was there was significant pain reduction, improvement in function, statistically significant out to 12 months. So this was a very exciting confirmation of all of the learnings that we had from our previous studies. And of course, also, it did help us with the third study that we've done, which is Para-002, which was the confirmation of our lowest effective dose, which is what the FDA asked us to do. And then we have a lot of real-world evidence in subjects who've been treated by their doctors and those patients unresponsive to registered medications for treatment of osteoarthritis. So a lot of those learnings have really allowed us to refine our scope and allow us to commence with a high degree of confidence into our phase 3 study. And also, as I mentioned, it gives us significant confidence in our interim analysis. And that will be the subject of a separate webinar in the coming month, where we will take people through the data that we've generated in all of these studies to show the drug effect size at day 112. We do have that data. We will be presenting that, and hopefully all investors will be able to see our degree of confidence in our phase 3 trial. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Melanie Duiker, who is our Head of Clinical Development, to take you through our updates in relation to the pivotal phase 3 clinical trial.
Thank you, Paul. So we just wanted to give a bit of an overview of what's happening currently with the phase 3 trial and a bit of an update. So just a reminder, this is a double-blind placebo-controlled trial, which is phase 3. And we are, as Paul said, taking all of the learnings of the previous studies. So this will be a trial with adults with moderate to severe osteoarthritis with pain in the knee. They will also be patients that have needed to fail their conservative therapy. So in this case, this is patients that have tried some sort of non-pharmacological therapy, such as weight loss or exercise, swimming, etc. And also tried some more conservative therapies or pharmacological therapies such as paracetamol or NSAIDs or COX inhibitors. So we were planning on having 65 sites with 55 in the US and 10 in Australia. We have been lucky enough to find a number of very experienced OA trial sites in Australia. So we are currently looking at 15 sites here and 50 sites in the US. As Paul said, 466 patients, which we will randomize 1-to-1 with placebo and PPS. Next slide. So these are just a few of the key objectives of the trial. For those of you who know the 002 trial, you will notice that there are some differences when it comes to the primary objective. So we have moved away from WOMAC for pain as the primary objective and looking more at the weekly average ADP pain. So calculating the average or the daily average of these patients for 7 days, and then calculating the average of that. So, and we will be doing that at day 112. Now, this was based on information that we received both from KOLs and from the FDA, based on the information we had already provided them and the standard for consideration of pain after following of treatment. So this is approximately 3 months post their last dose of injection. We will also be evaluating knee pain function. This will remain with WOMAC. It will also be at day 112, and this will be our key primary objective for Europe. So for the FDA, we will have a single primary objective, and in Europe, we will have a multiple primary objective. Other key secondary objectives that we have had really good results with and shown in previous trials are the patient global impression of change. This means that the patient's impression of how they've changed in terms of their pain and function and everyday activities from before the treatment till after the end of the treatment. And we will also continue to evaluate the stiffness and overall and the pain from WOMAC. One of the secondary objectives that's not listed here, but you'll see in the exploratory objectives as a correlation, is the biomarker changes in the X-rays and MRIs. So we are looking as a secondary objective for changes in BML, joint synovitis, cartilage volume, bone shape, and joint space width. So these will be a secondary objective. The exploratory objective is then to compare those biomarkers and what we see there to the clinical outcomes of pain and function to see if we can correlate what's happening with the changes versus what's happening with the patient in terms of their pain and function. Based on the 008 data, we are also continuing to look at biomarkers. So we're looking at serum biomarkers in this study to further confirm what we saw in the 008 study. And we're continuing to characterize the PK and the anti-drug antibody profile of these patients. Next slide, Simon. In terms of the trial design, it does have the 39, up to day 39 for injections. So that's the 6 injections twice a week. It is at 2 milligrams per kilogram, which is the effective dose that we showed in the 008 and previous trials. There'll be 233 patients per arm. You see this may be subject to change, and that will be based on the interim analysis results. But at this stage, we are anticipating to recruit the entire 466. There is a 52-week follow-up period, and this is 12 weeks post the last dose. We saw in 008 and you saw in Kumagai that it is efficacious up to day to week 52 post-injection. So we will be evaluating the program all the way out to day 404. Including it, this is the interim analysis that Paul has referred to. This will be conducted when approximately 50% of the patients reach day 112. So that's approximately 3 months after their last injection. The idea then would be to make sure that we've got the best, cleanest data possible at that stage perform the interim analysis, and have an independent data safety monitoring board review both the efficacy analysis as well as safety at that stage, and make a decision around the results of the trial, which could potentially be being able to stop early based on the target effect size of the trial. So this analysis is expected to occur in early 2026. And we were all extremely looking forward to the outcome of that. And I think, next slide, Simon. So for that, I'd like to hand you back to Paul, who will go into the commercial aspects of the study, of the trial.
Thank you very much, Melanie. And I'm now going to take everyone through the rationale behind the acquisition of Proteo Bioactives. Just by way of background, Proteo Bioactives was a company that Professor Peter Ghosh set up to continue his research into osteoarthritis and drugs for the treatment of osteoarthritis after he retired from the North Shore Hospital, where he was head of research for many, many years. Peter published over 400 papers in relation to the causes or biochemical factors that occur in osteoarthritis to give us a very deep understanding of how the joint is broken down over time and what are some of the targets associated with treating osteoarthritis. So I met with Peter about 5 years ago, and we were talking about various things. And Peter told me at the time that he was working on something that was very, very special. And this is all of his work. This is not a work that was conceived by anyone other than Peter. And Peter took this work all the way through to a small pilot clinical study to demonstrate his findings. And those findings were patented, and that patent has been granted in the United States, in the UK, Australia, and examination is underway in New Zealand and Canada and Europe. So it has successfully gone through the patent office. The idea behind this was that Peter felt that the standard of care or the treatment algorithm of somebody who has mild to minor osteoarthritis is generally prescribed a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory or a COX-2 inhibitor. Now that is very standard, and the COX-2 inhibitors are not without some degree of potential risk, particularly in relation to adverse effects affecting the gastrointestinal tract as well as the kidneys. So Peter felt for some time that this was an area of concern, and he wanted to investigate it further. And all of that investigation led to this particular patent. And one of the advantages of the patent is that it does allow for the lower use of the dose of NSAIDs or the COX-2 inhibitors, which is very important because these COX-2 inhibitors have a relatively narrow therapeutic to toxicology window. So the effective dose is very close to the toxic dose, particularly in dogs, but also in humans. So it was considered that one of the ways of overcoming this limitation was to try and look at ways of reducing the dose of the coxib administered to the patient or to the animal. So reducing the side effects was a big part of what he was looking to do. He also knew that PPS, through his work and ongoing collaboration with Professor Kumagai, had shown that PPS had potential to improve the joint structures by reducing the amount of C2C that was produced in the disease. So he was hoping that maybe the combination of the two would reduce the dose of the coxib and at the same time provide the benefits of pentosan polysulfate sodium. Now, one of the very well-known facts in the background to all of this was the challenge of how are we able to increase the bioavailability of PPS when taken orally. It's been known for many, many decades that the bioavailability of PPS when taken orally is only around 6% of the dose that's administered. So it's a very, very small amount of the dose that gets into the systemic circulation, and therefore the significant benefits of Pentosan are not achieved through the oral route. So Peter continued to investigate this, and then he found that, quite surprisingly, that if you were to lower the dose of the coxib and at the same time add PPS to that treatment, you could actually enhance the bioavailability of Pentosan, allowing it to have its effects on the subject. And so it's created this situation where we felt at Paradigm that strategically we needed to add this to our suite of offerings for people going forward. We would like to see ourselves one day as being the total supplier of treatments for people with either mild all the way up to severe osteoarthritis through the combination of the injectable PPS plus the oral PPS in combination with the coxib inhibitor. Next slide, please. So just to put that into context, you'll see that this is a slide that we've shown many times before. Across the bottom axis, you'll see minor, mild, moderate, and severe osteoarthritis, and then above that, the therapies that are known to be effective in those stages of the disease. So we know injectable pentosan polysulfate sodium is quite effective in the moderate to severe stage of the disease. But by adding this program to our treatments for osteoarthritis, we believe that we can capture an even bigger part of the osteoarthritis treatment market by going all the way back to minor and mild osteoarthritis through the combination of PPS with a COX-2 inhibitor. So strategically, as I've mentioned, we want to be a pain company that's treating osteoarthritis pain and other forms of arthritis, all the way from mild disease all the way through to severe. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of the understanding of how this works. This is something that Peter and I spoke about at length. There's this particular compound, arachidonic acid. This is released from the phospholipid membrane when the cell is under injury or it's exposed to inflammatory cytokines. This acid is released and it is metabolized through oxygenases. So on the left-hand side, you can see the COXes. This is cyclooxygenase, or abbreviated to COX. And years ago, it was found that the COX-1 inhibitors did have quite a significant adverse effect profile. And later it was found that there's a different isoform of the COX-1, which is now called COX-2. And COX-2 has a safer profile compared to COX-1. I won't go into the reasons for that, but needless to say, COX pathway is one of the ways that this compound is converted into prostaglandins, and prostaglandins are pain mediators and also stimulate inflammation. So by blocking that COX pathway, you are in fact blocking many of the compounds that relate to pain and also inflammation in osteoarthritis. But on the right-hand side, you'll see there's the LOX, which is the lipooxygenase pathway. This is where the same acid is broken down with a different enzyme, the lipooxygenase, and this forms a number of different compounds, leukotrienes, which can also activate many of the immune cells, particularly the leukocytes, and it can lead to infiltrating leukocytes, which stimulate the release of inflammatory cytokines. So it is important in what Peter felt was that you really want to try and block both pathways. He was working with a group in the UK that felt that if you block the COX pathway, you shunt the metabolism of that compound down the LOX pathway. And so therefore, many companies, many big pharma companies are trying to now develop on from the COX-2 inhibitors to what is known as a dual inhibitor. In fact, inhibiting both pathways, the COX-2 and the LOX pathway, providing an overall better outcome than just blocking one pathway. So Peter was looking at this. He did some work with the group in the UK and found that PPS does block the LOX pathway. So combining the two made perfect sense, and we think that this could be a dual inhibitor and create a new class of compounds, being the dual inhibitor of the metabolism of the acid, providing a more sustained and better outcome and less side effects than blocking one side of the pathway, being the COX-2 pathway. So Peter did do a small pilot study. The change from baseline is measured on the y-axis, and as you can see, the different categories of pain and joint stiffness on the x-axis. And you can see from the dark coloured bars, that's looking at a small population. I mean, these are small studies, but nonetheless, the combination product was administered to humans with hand OA on the left-hand side and knee OA on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, you can see the little horizontal bar is the mean, and obviously the improvement in the pentacoxib group, the combination of pentosan and the COX-2 inhibitor, improves over the COX inhibitor alone. So we know the COX inhibitor is working, but it appears that the small study yet to be fully evaluated, still in this small pilot study, gives the impression that the combination will be more effective than the COX inhibitor alone. Bear in mind, on the left-hand side in the pentacoxib group, while we are comparing the coxib to the coxib alone on the right-hand side in the comparator, the coxib amount or concentration on the left-hand side combined with pentosan is half the concentration of the coxib on the right-hand side. So you've only got half the coxib in that formulation with pentosan. So by reducing the dose by half, you're getting an improved outcome and obviously less side effects. And we have to prove all of that in studies down the track. But nonetheless, the potential is there to have a new class of treatment, being an improved or a dual inhibitor of the COX and the LOX pathways. NEOA, very similar results. Talking to Peter, the analgesic measurement on the x-axis, being the end or last measurement taken, that is equivalent to the amount of additional analgesics that were taken in addition to the therapy. So you can see that the mean on both of those coxibs alone is higher than the coxib plus pentosan, indicating that the use of rescue medication was much less in the pentacoxib group compared to the coxib alone group. So that's really outlines, I think, the potential that we have here. Hand OA, knee OA, mild to minor OA. The treatment algorithm could be a COX-2 inhibitor plus pentosan, providing lower doses of coxibs, which I think most physicians would agree that lowering the dose of coxibs is a very important approach to take, and a welcomed approach, because there's no doubt the coxibs still have some ongoing risk. Now, with the COX-2 inhibitors, it is a preferred blocking. It's not a complete and absolute blocking of all the COX-2. There is still some blocking of the COX-1. So that's where some of these safety issues arise from. So the market potential, as you can see, from 2024 to 2030, we're talking about the coxib market going from $8.19 billion US to 2030 being 11.23 billion. There's still around about a 5.5% compound annual growth rate in the uptake and use of the coxibs in both the human and the veterinary markets, despite their limitations in relation to toxicity. So there's no doubt that first-line treatment in osteoarthritis is still dominated by the COX-2 inhibitors. So we think an outstanding opportunity down the track for Paradigm. I won't go into all of these details, but obviously we have done some market testing with some of our consultant veterinarians and rheumatologists who agree that the concept of adding pentosan to a coxib inhibitor is a very nice idea. We do have to go through some development. Obviously, we have to do the formulation of combining the two drugs. Then we have to go through some safety and efficacy studies, etc., etc. But we are deferring all of that work until after the phase 3 trial reads out, because we want to retain our focus on the phase 3 trial. That is absolutely critical for Paradigm. We are not developing this significantly while we're in a phase 3 trial. Our resources are being focused on a phase 3 trial, assuming we get the positive readout of the interim analysis or the readout of the phase 3 trial. We will then have, we believe, sufficient means of funding the development work for this. So the development work for the combination product will be very minor, and it will not be allocating resources from our phase 3 program. Next slide, please. So now it's with great pleasure that I hand over to Paradigm's Chief Financial Officer, who's going to take us through the very exciting news from today. Over to you, Abby.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks everyone for joining us. So as we have mentioned at the commencement of the webinar, we're very pleased to announce that we have secured $27 million worth of funding via a convertible note facility, partnering with Obsidian Global, who have a lot of success in both Australian and global markets in funding companies to take them to the next stage of their development. And they're proving to be a very supportive partner to work with. So we're looking forward to maintaining a strong relationship with our convertible note partner, our funding partner on that, on this journey. So our initial drawdown for this convertible note will be $7 million to provide immediate funding to continue our site activation process and to start recruiting and treating patients, as Melanie has already run through. We then are able to draw down the rest of the facility in $5 million tranches at our timing discretion. And this amount of funding will ensure that we are fully funded with runway through several key clinical milestones, including the activation of all our planned sites across the US and Australia, the completion of 100% of the 466 patient recruitment that we're expecting to finalise through to first half of calendar year 2026, as well as funding us with runway through to the interim analysis of the first 50% of patients at day 112, which is scheduled for mid-calendar year 2026, as Melanie and Paul have already discussed. So this has been around a 7-month journey to get to today, where we're announcing our preferred convertible note partner. We have worked with over 7 different providers to ensure that we have been able to manage to negotiate to key terms that were very important to the company in order to make sure that it met our particular requirements for control over dilution, control over different funding opportunities, so allowing us to maintain flexibility in the coming months to look at what's best for the company and shareholders at each inflection time. And that may be further drawdowns on the convertible note, and that may be other types of funding as they present themselves to the company in the environment. So it does give us more flexibility over the next 12 months. It also allows us to monitor the market leading into the pivotal February 26 date of our loyalty options, which hopefully will provide further funding to the company and allow us to make further decisions around funding going into 2026 and 2027 after the interim analysis. So in order to maintain the strong balance sheet, we have made sure that we are fully funded with runway for the full interim analysis and recruitment of the trial, to ensure that we, really take the company to that next clinical milestone with no further pressure on funding. We move to the next one. I'll just run through the key terms. So I've already mentioned the facility is for $27 million, which is around $41.2 million on today's current exchange rates. It is funded in US dollars, and we do pay a significant amount of our costs in US dollars for the clinical trial. So we will actually be holding that money in US dollars to ensure that we are, saving the exact amount that we receive, and not exposing to exchange rate risk for the fact that we fund the trial also in US dollars. The face value of each of those convertible notes will be $1.09, so a 9% uplift. There is no interest payable on the convertible note over the period. It does have the face value uplift, but no interest is accruing on top of that. The maturity for each tranche is 24 months, so 2 years from each purchase date. And very importantly, we have a no shorting clause in the agreement, so there's no short selling of the Paradigm shares during the terms of the agreement, supporting alignment with shareholder interests and our funding partner. So we will be funded with $7 million within 5 business days of agreement execution, which was today, and then we will be receiving the first $7 million, and the placement shares, the $8 million placement shares, will be issued at the same time, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then we have the subsequent drawdowns up to the commitment limit. In terms of pricing, so for the first fixed period, there is a fixed conversion price. So for the first tranche, the first drawdown of $7 million, for the first period, it will be 75 cents, so a significant uplift to the current trading price. That will be the price for the conversion over the first 30 days. After that period, it will be the lesser of 94% of the lowest 5 volume weighted average prices of the 20-day period, or the fixed conversion price. So the lower of those two. And for subsequent purchases, so additional drawdowns, that will revert to first 30 days being 150% of the 5-day volume weighted price prior to drawdown. And then after that 30 days, again, the lesser of 94% or the fixed conversion price. So you can see there we have been able to negotiate carefully on quite a tight discount to the trading price for conversions. In the case of an event of default, and that there are details of the default events in the announcement, that 94% does move to 84% to reflect the higher risk that Obsidian is taking on in that, that extenuating and unlikely circumstance that we are in an event of default. We also have an ownership cap of 9.99% shareholding on any conversion that's to mitigate Obsidian becoming a significant shareholder, and that's for a protection for both shareholders and for our funding partner. In terms of redemption, at the maturity of 2 years, they are redeemable for cash at 110% of face value. Now, noting that that would be whatever remains on each of those drawdowns after conversions for the preceding 2 years. If the company would like to early redeem, and this is a flexibility component that we were, we were really seeking out with the right partner, we are allowed to early redeem with notice, and that's permitted at the 110% as well. We also have a proceeds-based redemption. So very important to the company was to ensure that we still had the flexibility to undertake equity capital raises if they were the best use of the best method of raising funds at some time in the future. And Obsidian was very happy to negotiate on this. If we do a capital raise in the future of up to $20 million US, so approximately 30 Australian, 10% of those proceeds will go towards paying down any outstanding debt up to the amount that is outstanding, noting that they may have been converting along the way. If we raise over US 20 million or over approximately Australian $30 million, then 15% of those funds will go to paying debt, while the rest of the funds will go back into the company for whatever purpose we're raising the funds for at the time. Next slide. So just before we talk about the upcoming catalysts, I just wanted to summarize that we have gone through a very significant process to really identify the right partner and the right terms to suit the company to ensure flexibility. We've also gone through extensive due diligence with multiple potential lenders, and as I said, a 7-month process to get to today. So we're very confident that this is answering the wishes and the needs of shareholders to look for a funding option that gives us future flexibility, a level of security to the interim analysis and beyond, and also in circumstances where the share price is positive and has momentum, such as today, clearly less dilutive than an equity capital raise, which might have had to be at a higher discount. So we are very excited to now progress with the clinical trial, knowing that we have the funding locked away until at least June 2026. And with that, I'll hand back to Paul to run through the upcoming catalysts for the company.
Yes, thank you very much, Abby. And so the first one, which we expect to reach in the second half of this year, is the 50% recruitment of participants into the phase 3 trial. Mel, I might just ask you to say a few words on what's been happening in the background in relation to setting up for the clinical trial, because I think some people might think, well, we've consented a small number of subjects, but I think that's going to change dramatically when people understand the huge amount of work that's gone into setting things up.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, in terms of the setup of the study, we spent the last 3.5 or 4 months setting up all of the systems involved in, and this is a very complicated study, and it's very extensive with the number of sites that we have. So we have built all of the systems around that. We have initiated sites in Australia. So, and we have selected all 65 sites. So all of those 65 sites are selected and know they're going to be participating in the trial. On top of that, we've been doing all of the contracting, all of the budgeting, all of the ethics submissions. So as Paul said, we have ethics approvals in both Australia and the US. The first Australian sites have consented patients, and as you would have seen from yesterday, we are moving into consenting patients in the US. We have a significant number of sites now initiated in the US, and we will see those start consenting, and the remainder of the Australian sites consenting and moving into full steam ahead in the next month or two. So,
yeah. So, Mel, I think one of the things that impressed me was that with regards to recording daily pain, one of the things that has been set up is an external provider that sends out a SMS or an email alert to the participant, reminding them of doing their pain score on a daily basis, and that then triggers the patient to do their pain score, and all of that needs to really then shake hands back with the clinical trial master file, so that everything is coordinated and all the data is collected accurately, and all of that build has to be quality controlled and tested. And I'm happy to say all of that work has been done. But just to give investors a bit of an idea that those sorts of ways of making it convenient for the participants in the trial, getting a reminder, trying to standardize the time of day that everyone does their pain scores. It's a very, very big project, and that all has to be um, developed on a protocol specific basis. So that is a large amount of work that has been done. It's now live, and so any subjects that are now consented, that they will be able to, through their device, mobile phone or tablet, be getting updates about the trial. Also, we have three different providers that are external providers to the CRO who have initiatives in terms of being able to um, uh, uh, increase the recruitment rate. So there's Sightline and several other vendors who are now actively ramping up activities to start the recruitment process. So it might seem to some people that a few subjects being consented, it's going to take us a long time. But I think with all of the hard work that's gone into the background, we're now, I think, pretty much able to say that the setup is now complete and we move into recruitment, consenting and treating phase.
That's correct.
Thanks, Mel. Obviously, our plans are still to try and execute on a regional licensing agreement. We do have quite a number of big pharmaceutical companies that are telling us that they are ready and waiting for the interim results. And I think that's a major inflection point for the company. Should those interim results be positive, I think then we'll find that be quite a few companies wanting to transact with Paradigm. But in the meantime, we do have some ongoing interest in South Korea and China, and we hope that we can execute one of those agreements sometime later this year, but there's no guarantees given the interim analysis. Quite a number of companies believe that that would be better for them to wait until the program is even further de-risked. Interim analysis is a major milestone for the company. 50% of participants, 233 participants who've reached the day 112 follow-up period. We expect that interim analysis will be in mid-2026, and 100% recruitment of all participants into the trial we expect will be completed in the first half of 2026. So very ambitious, but again, in terms of planning, just so investors know, when we signed up with the CRO who is working with us in terms of recruiting patients into the study, we made sure that there were performance hurdles for the CRO, that they had to recruit subjects within a certain time frame. And there's also financial penalties should the CRO not achieve those recruitment rates within the prescribed time. So the contract is very clear that there are incentives and penalties in relation to the recruitment, and our plan is to follow that very, very carefully, monitor it every day through the CTMS, and make sure that we can get that milestone met within the timeframes outlined here. So, Simon, before I go to any questions, I would just like to say that the activities of what's been mentioned today is no mean feat, and it has been the result of many, many different people involved with the company. That includes our clinical team, Mel and Donna, and our clinical trial managers in the United States, as well as other people here in Australia, our CRO. We also have had fantastic support from our operations team to make sure that all of the drug and the placebo is sent out to the sites on time, etc., etc. Many, many different things. I'd also like to acknowledge the assistance the finance and investor relations department that's Abby and Simon have taken in making sure that we're able to get the agreements for the acquisition of Proteo Bioactives, and also the capital raise done within the time frame. I'd also like to acknowledge our regulatory team who have made sure that we are well and truly on track with all of our submissions to the agency. Also, our biometrics department who work in the background, providing us with ongoing support around quality of the data as we move forward. Also, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the lawyers on both sides. That's our side, which is Steinpag, and on Obsidian side, which is Spitfire lawyers out of both lawyers out of Perth. I'd also like to thank Obsidian and Ari Morris for his flexibility and his preparedness to work with us over the last 7 or 8 months to get this arrangement in place. I'd also like to thank all of our investors who've stayed loyal with us during this period of time. But I hope investors understand that we have taken, your concerns to heart and have come up with a plan that delivers what you were hoping, that we would be funded through to the major inflection points. We would do it in a way that would be potentially less dilutive than other forms. But I hope you can see the flexibility in this note allows us now to have one extra tool in the toolbox as far as raising capital. If at some stage we decide to raise it through another means, through a commercial deal or through equity capital raise, we're able to do that, and we have the convertible note as a backup, as another means of being able to address our financial needs as we go forward. So thanks to Ari from Obsidian. Of course, acknowledge and thank Peter Ghost for his contribution to Paradigm in the past and also going forward. Richard Lodge, who's been a great supporter and helped us with a lot of the technical aspects of the note, and also, of course, our ongoing support of Bell Potter. And I could go on, but obviously time is of the essence. But as Dr. Skerritt often says, it takes a village to make these things happen. It is not easy, but I'm sitting here today very proud of the work that's been done by many, many people. And if there's anyone there that I have omitted, my apologies. I think you know that you've done an amazing job to get us to this point. And yeah, it's a great day for Paradigm that we can now move forward and hit those milestones that have been outlined, and we will keep moving things forward.
Thanks, Paul. There is a few questions here, and a few have been answered. But first question is probably to you, Paul. Do you see a potential for breakthrough designation and/or accelerated approval post the interim analysis?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. So we already have fast track, and I think, as Melanie also highlighted, that if the data is very compelling through the interim analysis, then I do think that we will get definitely an accelerated approval pathway, because again, this is a non-opioid based drug. There are very few options for people with moderate to severe osteoarthritis. So yes, I think that would absolutely be the case.
Thanks, Paul. Maybe another one to you. What are the risks that are stopping institutional investors and bigger pharma companies from taking more interest in Paradigm's programs?
Well, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that there is interest by pharma companies, but I think the reality is we're talking about a pain indication, and I think if you look over the last 5 or 6 years, there's been many phase 3 trials with pain as an endpoint that have failed, and many of those are big pharma companies. Novartis has had 3 compounds that have failed. Grünenthal has had 2 phase 3 that have failed, both specialists in the pain space. And so I think there's no lack of interest, but I think a positive interim analysis would give them the necessary confidence to make a significant investment into the company at that time. So I think, yeah, it's a difficult one. That there is no lack of interest. I think everyone understands that a drug that can treat the symptoms of osteoarthritis, pain and joint stiffness, and at the same time, reduce, retard, slow down the progression of the disease is a game changer. It is a holy grail, and the market wants it. I think the only thing that we have to get across is that many companies have tried with compounds, and I think our colleague, ex-colleague, Dr. Ravi Krishnan summed it up very well when he was talking to investors. PPS is unique in that it is a multimodal drug, and osteoarthritis is a multifactorial disease. There are many different pathways, as I explained. One pathway with the production of the prostaglandins and leukotrienes. That's one pathway, and some drug companies then focus on one particular target in that pathway. And while that target, may be appropriate, very often what we see is that that pathway shunts to another pathway and the disease continues to progress, which is why we see, ongoing failures in this area. But Pentazan is very, very unique. It is multimodal. We know that it works by reducing enzymes that break down the extracellular matrix of cartilage. We know that it's a broad-based anti-inflammatory drug. We know that it also reduces the expression of nerve growth factor, one of the main mediators of pain in osteoarthritis. So it's doing many, many things at the one time. And I think for many companies, they find that a little difficult to understand, where they probably feel more comfortable with a single silver bullet approach. Let's find one pathway, attack one particular substrate in that pathway, and if it's not successful, then how can other people be successful? I think it comes back to the selection of the drug, and that's why I said with our phase 2 studies, we've seen absolutely consistent results over 6 phase 2 studies, all showing the same thing: significant pain reduction early on in the treatment course, and it persists out in the case of Ghost for 6 months, in the case of Kumagai out for 12 months, in the case of 005 out to 6 months, in the case of 008 out to 12 months. So we're seeing consistency in the results. So we've seen what others have done. We've been able to replicate that. So I hope investors don't think that there's no interest there at all. But I mean, I think one of the lessons that I learned from the last AGM is not to talk up the potential, but to basically get the job done and announce it when the deal is done, and not keep talking about the ongoing interest. But for that question, I hope that answers that person's question, that there is interest and there continues to be interest.
Thanks, Paul. Another question. Do we know roughly how much the COX-2 inhibitor combination increases the oral bioavailability of PPS?
We don't have those data, but our scientists, which will be our translational research manager, Dr. Catherine Stapleton, and her team, and outsourcing to various research centres, will be able to give us a very accurate amount. My understanding from Peter was that it's a 2 to 3 fold increase, but we have to have that validated, obviously. Peter did do some work, but what we do know is that the oral bioavailability of PPS alone, without the COX inhibitor, is only 5%, and that's well and truly understood. So I think yes, we're not getting too caught up in the COX-2 PPS combination right now. We have a job to deliver on our phase 3 program. So we will definitely come back to the market when we have more data. It's a great question, and one that we look forward to answering in the near term.
Thanks, Paul. Mel, I might just direct this one to you. Why is it that only 460 patients and we need 65 sites?
It's a very good question. So what we're planning on doing is recruiting in a very short period of time based on the previous trials that we've had and how we know clinical trials in general recruit. They do recruit not as rapidly as you would expect. So in order to meet the very significant timelines that we have increased the number of sites that we need to use. We are, however, reusing sites from the previous trial that used 120 sites, and we have selected the sites that we know have rapid startup and rapid recruitment in order to meet that shortened timeline. So.
Thanks, Mel. While I have you, what are the early stopping criteria for the 012 trial? Is it a target effect size p-value? I think we may address this in the upcoming clinical webinar with Donna. So I might just hold off on a couple of these questions until our next webinar, which will be explained through a presentation with Donna. There is one question, trying to find out clinical trial sites on clintrials.gov, but no sites are showing up. How can I find a US site?
Okay, so clintrials.gov will be updated as sites are activated. There is a delay once we update clinicaltrials.gov. It usually takes about a week before they're fully uploaded. So you would expect to start seeing them in the next week or so.
Okay, I think we might just squeeze in one more. Paul, maybe for you, can you give an idea of time to revenue generation from here?
Yes, I can, but we do have a number of different plans, which is probably beyond the scope of the discussion today, Simon. But we're looking to move this phase 3 clinical trial as quickly as possible, as Mel just said. There's no doubt that that they're ambitious targets to have all subjects recruited into the study by the first half of 2026. So we're moving at a very fast speed to try and conclude this, but we would hope that we would be into revenue in financial year 2027, 2028.
Thanks, Paul. We might hold it there. There is a couple of questions that will be relating to the upcoming webinar as well. So I might just hold those questions for that time when Dr. Skerritt can present the probability of success and the effect size related to the 012 clinical trial. So thank you everyone for your attendance today. Just a reminder, there will be a recording of today's webinar that will be available on the website later today. Thank you all and have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, Simon.
you.
Thanks everyone for attending.